The first rule of space combat, as Commander Sarah Hayes had learned at the Academy, was that there was nowhere to hide. Space was vast and empty, and energy signatures stood out like beacons against the void. The humans had known this for centuries. The Vex, apparently, were still figuring it out. The bridge of the UES Thunderchild hummed with quiet tension as Sarah studied the tactical display. The alien fleet hung in formation around the contested moon of Epsilon Eridani IV, their sleek, organic-looking vessels arranged in what their intelligence suggested was a standard defensive pattern. They had no idea the Thunderchild was there, lurking at the edge of the system with its revolutionary Hawking drive powered down to minimal levels. "Status report," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper despite knowing the aliens couldn't possibly hear her. Lieutenant Chen glanced up from his console. "Heat sinks at 87% capacity, Commander. We'll need to vent within the next 4 hours or risk system failure." Sarah nodded. 4 hours was plenty of time. Weapons? Railguns charged and ready. MDA's missiles primed. Point defense grid online, replied Weapons Officer Rodriguez, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface. This would be humanity's first proper engagement with the Vex Collective. First contact had gone poorly 8 months ago when the aliens had destroyed an unarmed research vessel near Proxima Centauri without warning or attempt at communication. The following skirmishes had been fought by automated drones and smaller craft, but this would be the first time the aliens would witness what humanity had truly been building out here in the darkness between stars. The Thunderchild represented 30 years of human ingenuity, paranoia, and the grim expectation that we wouldn't be alone forever. 2 kilometers of armor, weapons, and engines wrapped around a spine of ultra-dense metamaterials that could absorb incredible punishment. She wasn't just a warship, she was a statement. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Vex had been pushing into human territory for months, apparently confident in their technological superiority. They had yet to encounter any significant resistance, which had made them bold. Careless. Tactical. "Show me their command vessel again," Sarah ordered. The display zoomed in on the largest ship in the alien formation, a curved, almost elegant creation that reminded Sarah of a manta ray, if manta rays were made of some strange, iridescent metal that seemed to ripple occasionally like liquid. Their scans indicated it was approximately 3 kilometers long, half again, as large as the Thunderchild. Their energy readings suggest they're running at full capacity, Science Officer Patil observed. No attempt at concealment. "Why hide when you think you're alone?" Sarah murmured. "Communications, any transmissions between their vessels?" Communications Officer Walsh nodded. "Constant chatter, standard encryption. Nothing to suggest they're aware of us." Sarah took a deep breath. Humanity had been pushed back to its limits. Earth itself was beginning preparations for a possible invasion. The colonies on Mars and Europa were evacuating non-essential personnel. This moment, this ship, represented perhaps their best chance to change the course of this one-sided conflict. Navigation. Plot an approach vector that keeps us in the shadow of the gas giant until the last possible moment. Tactical. I want firing solutions for their command ship and their 2 largest support vessels. Sarah's voice was calm, measured. "We're going to show them what happens when you corner a species that spent its entire history preparing for the worst." The bridge crew worked in practiced silence, each officer focused entirely on their tasks. These men and women represented the best humanity had to offer, not just in skill, but in resolve. Each had lost someone or something to the Vex's unexplained aggression. As the Thunderchild began its silent approach, Sarah thought about the alien commander on the other side. Did the Vex have a concept of fear? Would they understand the message humanity was about to send? It didn't matter. After today, they would learn. The massive gas giant loomed ahead, its swirling storms providing the perfect cover for their approach. The Thunderchild's heat sinks were now at 92% capacity, still manageable, but time was becoming a factor. "All hands to battle stations," Sarah ordered, and throughout the massive vessel, over 3,000 crew members prepared for combat. Weapons, prepare to fire on my mark. The Thunderchild slipped around the curve of the gas giant, and for the first time, the human warship had a direct line of sight to the alien fleet. Target locked, Rodriguez confirmed. Sarah took one last look at the tactical display, at the alien vessels hanging there, oblivious to the harbinger of destruction that had just emerged from behind the planet. Fire. The Thunderchild's main railgun array lit up, accelerating 20-ton tungsten rods to a significant fraction of light speed. The first shots crossed the distance to the alien command ship in seconds, striking with the force of small nuclear weapons. The kinetic energy alone was enough to tear through the vessel's shields and hull like tissue paper. The alien fleet seemed to freeze in confusion as their flagship erupted in silent explosions. Their formation broke apart in what appeared to be panic, some vessels accelerating toward the threat, others turning to flee. Second volley, fire, Sarah ordered, and another barrage of hypersonic projectiles streaked across space, claiming 2 more Vex ships. Now the aliens were responding, their own weapons charging. Strange energy signatures bloomed across their fleet as they prepared to return fire. But they had been caught completely off guard, their defensive formation now working against them as they struggled to reorient toward the unexpected threat. Incoming fire, Tactical warned as the first alien energy weapons discharged toward the Thunderchild. Brace for impact, Sarah called, gripping the arms of her command chair. The shots connected, and the bridge shuddered. Damage reports flashed across multiple screens, but the ship's innovative armor had performed as designed, absorbing and distributing the energy. Minimal damage to outer hull sections, Chen reported, a note of relief in his voice. Their weapons aren't as effective as intelligence suggested. Or perhaps, Sarah thought, intelligence had overestimated the Vex based on their aggressive posture. Perhaps they weren't the unstoppable force humanity had feared. Perhaps they had simply never encountered serious resistance before. Launch MDA's missiles, full spread, Sarah ordered. Multiple decoy assault system missiles erupted from the Thunderchild's launch tubes, each one splitting into dozens of smaller projectiles, some armed with conventional warheads, others simply decoys designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. The space between the human warship and the alien fleet became a chaos of explosions, false readings, and destruction. 3 more Vex vessels succumbed to the barrage, breaking apart in spectacular fashion. The remaining ships were now fully engaged, returning fire with increasing coordination, but their initial disarray had cost them dearly. As the battle intensified, Sarah could almost feel the alien commander's shock and confusion through the tactical display. The Vex had clearly expected another easy victory against an inferior opponent. Instead, they had found themselves under attack by a vessel that seemed specifically designed to counter their technology and tactics. They're attempting to regroup, Tactical reported as the surviving Vex ships maneuvered to form a new defensive pattern. Sarah nodded. Good. That means they're afraid. For the first time since the Vex had appeared in human space, they were on the defensive. For the first time, they were the ones being hunted. And as the Thunderchild accelerated toward the heart of their formation, weapons blazing, Sarah knew that this day would change everything. The message would be clear. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. We would not surrender our worlds without a fight. And if the Vex wanted to continue this war, they would pay for every inch of space with their blood, or whatever it was that flowed through their alien veins. The bridge shuddered again as another volley of alien weapons found their mark. Warning lights flashed, but the Thunderchild pressed on, unleashing hell upon the invaders who had underestimated humanity's capacity for warfare. The real battle was just beginning. Another impact rocked the Thunderchild, this one more substantial than the last. The lighting on the bridge flickered momentarily before emergency systems compensated. Direct hit to portside weapons array, Chen called out, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. Sections 12 through 14 reporting damage. automated systems containing hull breaches. Sarah nodded grimly. The Vex were adapting faster than expected. Their initial confusion had given way to a more coordinated response. The element of surprise was fading. "Bring us about. Heading 047 Mark 32, she ordered. "Let's not give them a stationary target. Lieutenant Rodriguez, focus fire on their flanking vessels. They're trying to surround us." The massive human warship banked in space, its maneuvering thrusters firing in calculated bursts. For a vessel of its size, the Thunderchild moved with surprising agility, a testament to the engineering teams that had labored over her design for more than a decade. "Commander, we're picking up unusual energy readings from two of their support ships," Science Officer Paddle reported, her brow furrowed as she analyzed the incoming data. "They appear to be channeling power away from weapons and toward something else." "Specifics, officer," Sarah demanded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Unknown, Commander, but the energy signature resembles what we saw at New Horizon Colony before." Patil's voice trailed off, but everyone on the bridge knew what she meant. Before the colony was reduced to atomic particles by some kind of Vex superweapon. Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The Thunderchild was humanity's most advanced warship, but there were still unknowns when it came to Vex technology. Some of their capabilities remained beyond human understanding. Time to intercept for those energy buildups. "At current charge rates, approximately 3 minutes, Paddle responded. Sarah made a quick calculation. Not enough time to take out both vessels before they deploy whatever they're charging. "Rodriguez, focus all firepower on the Lid support ship. Communications, send an emergency burst transmission to Fleet Command. Include all our sensor data on these energy signatures." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, each member understanding that they might be the last line of defense for humanity's outer colonies. If the Thunderchild failed here, the path to Earth would lie wide open. As railgun fire and missiles streaked toward the targeted Vex vessel, Sarah thought back to the first reports of alien contact. She had been stationed on Mars then, overseeing security for the research outposts. The initial messages had been confused, fragmented, tales of strange ships appearing at the edge of colonized space, ignoring all attempts at communication. When the first attacks came, humanity had been woefully unprepared. The Vex struck without warning or apparent motive, obliterating outposts and research stations with surgical precision. The few survivors spoke of ships that moved like living things, weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics, and a complete absence of mercy. In the 8 months since, humanity had scrambled to respond. Old warships were recommissioned, new ones rushed into production. The Thunderchild had been nearly complete when the attacks began, the first of a new class of deep space combat vessels, designed to project human military power into the furthest reaches of colonized space. Instead, she had become the tip of the spear in humanity's desperate defense. "Target hit," Rodriguez announced as their concentrated barrage finally overwhelmed the Vex ship's defenses. The alien vessel shuddered under the impact of multiple railgun rounds, then seemed to fold in on itself as secondary explosions ripped through its hull. "Enemy vessel neutralized." "One down," Sarah acknowledged. "Redirect fire to the second." Her order was cut short as the bridge rocked violently. Warning klaxons blared as damage reports flooded in from across the ship. "Multiple impacts on starboard side," Chen shouted over the noise. "They've adapted their targeting algorithms. Our evasive patterns have been compromised." Sarah gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered again. "Engineering. Status report." Chief Engineer Takahashi's voice came through with noticeable strain. "Main power grid holding at 82%, Commander. We've lost 3 heat sink arrays and primary weapons control on the starboard side. Switching to secondaries now. We can keep fighting, but not indefinitely." The tactical display showed the remaining Vex ships regrouping, forming a new attack pattern that seemed specifically designed to exploit the Thunderchild's damaged sections. Their initial panic had been replaced by something that looked disturbingly like strategy. That second support ship is still building energy, Patel warned. 90 seconds to whatever they're planning. Sarah studied the display, mind racing through options. The Thunderchild was powerful, but not invincible. They had bloodied the Vex nose, destroyed their command ship and several support vessels, but the aliens were adapting with alarming speed. New contacts, Walsh suddenly called from communications. Multiple signatures entering the system at high velocity. Sarah felt her heart sink. Reinforcements. The Vex must have called for help when the attack began. The Thunderchild was formidable, but even she couldn't stand against two fleets. On screen, she ordered, preparing herself for the worst. The main view screen shifted to show a cluster of ships emerging from what appeared to be small, localized distortions in space, the telltale signature of human jump drives. Leading the formation was a vessel nearly as large as the Thunderchild, its hull bearing the distinctive profile of an Armstrong-class carrier. IFF confirmed, Walsh reported, unable to keep the relief from his voice. It's the UES Armstrong and her battle group. They're hailing us. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Put them through. The face of Admiral William Torres appeared on the communication screen, his weathered features set in a grim expression that softened slightly when he saw Sarah. "Looks like you started the party without us, Commander Hayes," he said. "Fleet Command received your earlier updates and decided you could use some company. The Fifth Fleet is at your disposal. Your timing is impeccable, Admiral," Sarah replied. "We have multiple hostile contacts and one charging what appears to be a superweapon. Transmitting tactical data now." Torres nodded, his expression hardening again as he received the information. "Understood. Armstrong Battle Group will engage the main formation. Your orders are to take out that superweapon before it deploys." "With pleasure, sir," Sarah acknowledged as the transmission ended. She turned to her crew, noting the renewed determination in their eyes. "You heard the Admiral. Let's finish what we started." The Thunderchild swung around, engines flaring as it accelerated toward the remaining Vex support ship. Behind them, the human reinforcements engaged the alien fleet, space lighting up with weapons fire and explosions. Sarah watched as the tactical display updated with new information. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the Vex had appeared in human space, they were facing an enemy that could match their ferocity, an enemy fighting for its very survival. And if there was one thing humanity's bloody history had taught them, it was how to survive against all odds. "Incoming fire," Chen shouted as the Thunderchild barreled toward the Vex support ship. Multiple energy beams lanced out from the alien vessel, scoring glancing hits along the human warship's hull. "Evasive pattern Delta 6, Sarah ordered. "Rodriguez, target their primary weapon nodes." "Patel, what's the status on that energy buildup?" 30 seconds to critical," Patel responded, her eyes locked on her console. "Energy signatures are becoming increasingly unstable. Whatever they're planning, it's bigger than what we saw at New Horizon." The Thunderchild shuddered as another volley struck home. Warning lights flashed across multiple stations, but the massive vessel pushed forward, its own weapons returning fire with devastating effect. Railgun rounds tore through the alien ship's outer defenses, while point defense lasers intercepted incoming projectiles. "Engineering to bridge," Takahashi's voice crackled over the comms. "Commander, we're redlining the main reactors to give you everything we've got, but we can't sustain this level of power output for more than a few minutes. Heat sinks are approaching critical failure." "Understood, Chief," Sarah replied. "We won't need long." She turned to her tactical officer. "Rodriguez, prepare to fire all remaining MDAS missiles. Saturate their defenses." Around them, the battle had expanded into a full-scale engagement between the human and Vex fleets. The Armstrong and its battle group had plunged into the heart of the alien formation, breaking their cohesion and preventing them from coordinating their attacks. Individual duels between warships lit up the void, brief, brilliant flashes of light, marking the deaths of vessels and their crews. Sarah forced herself to focus on their primary target. The Vex support ship had positioned itself behind a screen of smaller vessels, using them as shields while its mysterious weapon continued to charge. 15 seconds to critical energy levels, Patel warned. Multiple hostiles blocking our firing solution, Rodriguez added. Sarah studied the tactical display, looking for an opening. The Vex screen was tight, disciplined. There was no clear path to their target, at least not while maintaining a safe distance. She made her decision. Navigation. Plot a direct course through their defensive screen. Maximum thrust. Lieutenant Commander Reyes at the navigation console turned to face her, eyes wide. Commander, at that range, we'll be inside our own missile blast radius. I'm aware, Lieutenant, Sarah said firmly. Plot the course. Reyes hesitated for only a moment before turning back to his console. Course plotted. Awaiting your command. Sarah opened the shipwide comms. All hands, brace for impact and prepare for close quarters engagement. This is not a drill. Throughout the massive vessel, 3,000 men and women secured equipment, sealed pressure doors, and prepared for the worst. Many had served with Sarah for years. They trusted her judgment, even when it led them directly into danger. Course laid in, Reyes confirmed. Ready on your mark. Sarah took a deep breath. Execute. The Thunderchild's engines flared to maximum output, driving the warship forward with sudden, violent acceleration. The Vex defensive screen reacted immediately, their smaller vessels moving to intercept, but they had expected a more conventional approach. They weren't prepared for a direct, headlong charge. The first collision came seconds later, as the Thunderchild plowed through a Vex frigate, the smaller vessel shattering against the human warship's reinforced prow. Alarms blared across the bridge as impact after impact rocked the ship. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7, Chen called out. Automated systems responding. Maintain course, Sarah ordered, her knuckles white as she gripped her command chair. Time to weapon discharge. 10 seconds, Paddle responded. 9, 8. The view screen showed the Vex support ship growing larger by the second as the Thunderchild bore down on it, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches. The alien vessel was firing continuously now, its energy weapons carving glowing furrows across the human warship's armor. 5 seconds. 4, 3. Fire everything we've got, Sarah commanded. The Thunderchild unleashed its remaining arsenal at point-blank range. Railguns, missiles, energy weapons, all focused on a single target. At such close proximity, there was no time for the Vex vessel to evade. The barrage struck home, overwhelming its already taxed defenses and penetrating deep into its structure. Direct hits registered. Rodriguez shouted over the cacophony of alarms and damage reports. Their primary systems are failing. On the tactical display, the energy buildup within the Vex ship suddenly destabilized, the carefully controlled power flow becoming chaotic, unpredictable. Energy surge detected, Patel warned. They're losing containment. Hard to port. Full reverse thrust, Sarah ordered immediately. The Thunderchild's maneuvering systems strained to comply, the massive vessel pivoting away from the stricken Vex ship as its engines reversed thrust. They were still dangerously close when the alien vessel's power core finally breached. The explosion was unlike anything Sarah had ever witnessed, a rapidly expanding sphere of energy that seemed to distort the very fabric of space around it. The blast wave struck the Thunderchild with devastating force, overwhelming its already damaged shields and slamming into the armored hull. The bridge went dark as primary power failed, emergency lighting casting everything in a dim red glow. For several terrible seconds, the only sounds were the groaning of stressed metal and the hiss of ruptured conduits. Damage report, Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. Systems slowly came back online as backup power engaged. The damage control display painted a grim picture, multiple hull breaches, entire sections venting atmosphere, fires raging through the lower decks. We've lost main engines, Chen reported, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Weapons systems offline. Life support functioning on auxiliary power in most sections. Casualties? Sarah asked, dreading the answer. Chen consulted his display. Reports still coming in. Medical teams responding throughout the ship. It's bad, Commander. Sarah nodded grimly. What about the Vex ship? Completely destroyed, Patel confirmed. The weapon energy signature has dissipated. A small victory, paid for in blood. Sarah turned her attention to the wider battle. The tactical display was fragmented, many of the ship's sensors damaged or destroyed, but it showed enough. The Armstrong battle group was still engaged with the remaining Vex vessels, but the momentum had shifted. Without their command ship and with their superweapon destroyed, the aliens were fighting defensively now, trying to disengage. Communications, status? Sarah asked. Walsh worked his console, shaking his head in frustration. Main array destroyed. I'm routing through emergency systems. Limited capability only. Get me the Armstrong, Sarah ordered. After several tense moments, Admiral Torres's face appeared on the view screen, his image breaking up with static. Commander Hayes, he acknowledged. Your status? The Thunderchild is severely damaged, Sarah reported. Weapons offline, main engines destroyed. But we took out their superweapon. Torres nodded. We saw. That was some of the finest ship handling I've ever witnessed. Commander, hold position. We're mopping up the remaining hostiles now. The transmission cut off as the Armstrong banked away, pursuing a retreating Vex cruiser. Sarah leaned back in her command chair, suddenly aware of the pain from where her restraints had dug into her shoulders during the impact. Commander, Patel called out, her voice strangely hesitant. I'm detecting something unusual. Sarah turned toward her science officer. Define unusual, officer. The debris field from the destroyed Vex ship, Patel explained. Some of the fragments are moving independently. The tactical display zoomed in on the expanding cloud of wreckage. Sure enough, several larger chunks were changing course, their movements too precise to be the result of the explosion's kinetic energy. Analysis, Sarah demanded. Unknown, Patel admitted, but they appear to be on an intercept course with us. Sarah straightened in her chair. The Thunderchild was crippled, its weapons offline, much of its crew injured or dead. If these debris fragments represented some kind of Vex countermeasure or automated system, alert the Armstrong, she ordered, and get me a visual. The main view screen flickered, then showed the approaching debris. As they watched, the fragments began to change shape, mechanical components reconfiguring themselves into new forms. What the hell are those? Chen whispered. Sarah had no answer. After 8 months of conflict, the Vex were still revealing new surprises, new weapons, new horrors, and the Thunderchild, humanity's greatest warship, could do nothing but watch as they approached. Can we get any point defense systems back online? Sarah asked, her voice cutting through the tense silence on the bridge. Rodriguez shook her head. Negative, Commander. Weapons control circuits are fried. Engineering reports they might be able to restore minimal functionality to the starboard point defense grid, but it'll take at least 15 minutes. We don't have 15 minutes, Chen said grimly, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Those things will reach us in under 5. Sarah tapped her comm. Engineering, this is the bridge. Takahashi, I need options. Now. The chief engineer's voice came back strained and distorted. Commander, we're working miracles down here, just keeping life support online. Half my team is fighting fires in the secondary reactor chamber. Whatever those things are, you'll have to deal with them without weapons. Sarah processed this information quickly. The Thunderchild was crippled but not dead. There had to be something they could use. What about the emergency thrusters? She asked. Do we have enough maneuvering capability to evade? Negative, Rise replied from navigation. We can adjust our orientation, but actual movement is minimal with main engines offline. Sarah studied the approaching objects on the screen. There were 7 of them, each about the size of a shuttlecraft, moving with deliberate purpose toward the Thunderchild. Their original organic mechanical forms had reconfigured into something that resembled predatory insects, with multiple appendages extending from central cores. Patel, any readings on what these things are? Sarah demanded. The science officer frowned at her instruments. Difficult to get clear readings through all the interference, but they appear to be some kind of autonomous units, probably designed for boarding actions or ship-to-ship combat. They're giving off unusual energy signatures, similar to what we've seen from Vex command neural networks. Boarding drones, Sarah muttered. It made sense. The Thunderchild was crippled but intact. Why destroy a potential prize when you could capture it? She opened a shipwide channel. All decks, this is Commander Hayes. Prepare to repel boarders. This is not a drill. I repeat, prepare to repel boarders. All security teams to emergency stations. All non-combat personnel to secure areas. Throughout the ship, the remaining able-bodied crew members grabbed weapons from emergency lockers and set up defensive positions at key junctions and vital systems. Despite their injuries, despite their exhaustion, they moved with determined efficiency. They were the crew of humanity's finest warship, and they would not surrender it without a fight. Walsh, Sarah turned to her communications officer. Get me the Armstrong. We need support. The young officer worked frantically at his console. I'm trying, Commander, but there's some kind of interference. It might be coming from those drones. Keep trying, Sarah ordered. She turned to her XO. Chen, you have the bridge. I'm heading to Armory Section 5. Chen looked surprised. Commander, those things are heading for the main hull breach on Deck 7. That's where they'll board. Sarah checked her sidearm. A standard-issue high-velocity rail pistol. I'm not losing my ship to these things. Before Chen could protest further, Sarah was moving toward the bridge exit. Keep trying to reach the Armstrong. Tell them we need immediate assistance. The corridors of the Thunderchild were in chaos. Emergency lighting casting everything in a dull red glow. Damage control teams rushing to seal breaches. Medical personnel tending to the injured. Sarah moved purposefully through it all, acknowledging the salutes and determined looks from her crew with nods as she passed. She reached Armory Section 5 just as a security team was gearing up. Lieutenant Park, head of ship security, snapped to attention when he saw her. Commander, we were just about to move to Deck 7, he said. I'm coming with you, Sarah replied, selecting a combat vest and a more powerful rifle from the weapons rack. Park looked like he wanted to object but thought better of it. Yes, ma'am. We've got about 30 personnel assembled in defensive positions around the breach area. Portable shield generators are in place, but power is fluctuating. It'll have to do, Sarah said, checking her weapon. What do we know about Vex boarding tactics? Not much, Park admitted. This is the first time they've attempted to board one of our capital ships. Intelligence suggests they prefer overwhelming force, multiple entry points, shock troops followed by technical specialists. Sarah nodded. Then we make them pay for every meter. Her comm unit buzzed. Commander, this is Chen. Those things have attached themselves to the hull near the Deck 7 breach. They're cutting through. Understood. Keep trying to reach the Armstrong. Sarah looked at the assembled security team. Let's move. They double-timed it through the damaged corridors, reaching Deck 7 just as the first alarm sounded. The deck had been depressurized after the initial battle damage, and emergency bulkheads had sealed off the breached sections. Now those bulkheads were the only thing separating the human defenders from whatever was cutting its way through the outer hull. Status report, Sarah demanded as she took position behind a makeshift barricade. A sensor technician monitoring a portable unit looked up, his face pale. Multiple breach points, Commander. They've already penetrated the outer hull and are working through the emergency bulkheads. Estimate less than 2 minutes until they're through. Sarah surveyed their defensive position. They had about 30 personnel, a mix of security teams and volunteers from other departments. They had set up in a wide corridor junction that provided multiple firing angles and some cover. Portable shield generators hummed, creating a flickering energy barrier that might stop a few shots before failing. "Listen up," Sarah called out. "We don't know exactly what's coming through those doors, but we know they're Vex, and we know they want our ship. I don't intend to give it to them. Hold your positions, conserve ammunition, and remember your training. We are the crew of the Thunderchild, and this is our home." A ripple of determined nods passed through the defenders. They were scared, anyone would be, but they were ready. The first bulkhead began to glow red as something cut through from the other side. The metal bubbled and ran like liquid, forming an expanding circle that gradually gave way. As the cutters completed their work, the section of bulkhead fell inward with a heavy clang. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, through the swirling vapor of the depressurized compartment beyond, came movement. The first Vex boarder stepped through the breach. It wasn't what any of them had expected. Instead of the bipedal forms intelligence had suggested, this was something else entirely. A nightmarish fusion of mechanical components and what appeared to be biological material. It moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for its angular construction, multiple limbs ending in what were clearly weapons or tools. Behind it came others, each slightly different in configuration, but all sharing the same disturbing blend of machine precision and organic unpredictability. "Hold," Sarah ordered as the defenders raised their weapons. "Wait until they're in the kill zone." The Vex boarders advanced cautiously, scanning the corridor ahead. They seemed to communicate without speaking, their movements coordinated with unnerving precision. "Steady," Sarah murmured. "Steady." The lead Vex entity suddenly paused, its sensor array swiveling toward their position. It had spotted the ambush. "Fire," Sarah shouted, squeezing her trigger. The corridor erupted in a storm of railgun fire, energy beams, and explosives. The defenders poured everything they had into the advancing Vex boarders. The first wave staggered under the barrage, several going down immediately, their strange bodies coming apart in sprays of metal and fluid. But the others kept coming, returning fire with weapons that sent sizzling energy bolts through the human defenses. One of the portable shield generators overloaded with a spectacular flash, leaving a section of the barricade exposed. The Vex pressed their advantage, concentrating fire on the gap. 2 security officers went down, their armor no match for the alien weapons. Sarah adjusted her position, laying down covering fire as a medic dragged the wounded men to safety. "Commander," Lieutenant Park shouted over the cacophony of battle. More breaches reported on decks 4 and 10. "They're hitting us from multiple entry points." Sarah cursed under her breath. This wasn't a random boarding action. It was a coordinated assault designed to stretch their already limited defenses to the breaking point. Deck 4 housed the secondary command center, while Deck 10 contained the main engineering controls. The Vex knew exactly what they were doing. "Chen," she called into her comm unit, "status report on the bridge." Static crackled for several agonizing seconds before Chen's voice came through, broken and distorted. "Commander, multiple contacts, approaching bridge section, attempting to seal emergency bulkheads." The transmission cut off abruptly. "Chen, Lieutenant Chen, respond." Sarah called, but received only static in return. A deafening explosion rocked the corridor as one of the Vex boarders deployed some kind of breaching charge against their barricade. The makeshift defenses buckled, sending debris and injured defenders flying backward. Sarah was thrown against a bulkhead, her combat vest absorbing most of the impact, but leaving her momentarily dazed. As her vision cleared, she saw 3 Vex entities advancing through the smoke, their strange limbs reconfiguring into what appeared to be close combat weapons, wicked blades and pincers that gleamed under the emergency lighting. "Fall back to position Delta," she ordered, firing a sustained burst that caught one of the Vex in what might have been its sensor array. The thing staggered but didn't fall, black fluid leaking from its damaged components as it continued its relentless advance. The human defenders retreated in good order, laying down covering fire as they moved to their secondary defensive position. Sarah was about to follow when her comm unit crackled to life again. "Commander Hayes, this is Armstrong." Admiral Torres's voice broke through the interference. "Do you copy?" "Torres, we're being boarded. Multiple breach points. We need immediate assistance," Sarah called back, ducking as energy fire scorched the bulkhead above her head. "Negative on immediate support, Commander," Torres replied, his voice grim. "We're detecting a new Vex fleet entering the system. Massive energy signatures. They'd brought reinforcements. We're moving to intercept, but we can't reach your position." Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. No reinforcements, no rescue, just her crippled ship and her exhausted crew against an enemy that seemed to have limitless resources. As if sensing her thoughts, Pidal's voice came through on the command channel. "Commander, I've analyzed the patterns of the boarding craft. They're not trying to destroy the Thunderchild. They're attempting to capture it intact." Sarah considered this as she rejoined her retreating security team. Why would they want to capture rather than destroy? "The Hawking Drive," Paddle replied immediately. "Our stealth technology. It's the one advantage we have that they haven't been able to counter. If they capture the Thunderchild, they could reverse engineer it." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If the Vex obtained the secrets of the Hawking Drive, they could render humanity's entire defense strategy obsolete. They could strike anywhere in human space without warning. No colony would be safe. Earth itself would be directly vulnerable. "Lieutenant Park," Sarah called to her security chief, "we need to get to the Hawking Drive containment chamber. Now." Park looked at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The Omega Protocol." Sarah nodded grimly. The Omega Protocol, the last resort measure coded into every capital ship in the fleet. In the event that capture was imminent, the ship's most sensitive technologies were to be destroyed, even if it meant sacrificing the vessel itself. "Get your best people," Sarah ordered. "We move now." They fought their way through the ship's corridors, a running battle against increasingly numerous Vex boarders. Every junction, every bulkhead became a desperate skirmish. Sarah lost count of how many times they narrowly escaped being cut off or surrounded. The Thunderchild had become a maze of death, with both sides fighting for control of humanity's most advanced warship. By the time they reached the access corridor to the Hawking Drive chamber, their group had been reduced to Sarah, Park, and 4 other defenders. The sounds of combat echoed throughout the ship, evidence that pockets of resistance still fought on, but it was clear the Vex were gaining control deck by deck. "Seal the corridor behind us," Sarah ordered as they reached the heavily armored door to the drive chamber. "Buy us as much time as you can." Park nodded, directing 2 of his people to set up the last of their defenses at the corridor junction. Sarah approached the security panel, entering her command codes to unlock the chamber. The massive door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the heart of the Thunderchild's revolutionary technology. The Hawking Drive filled the center of the room, a complex arrangement of quantum field generators and gravity manipulation systems that allowed the ship to effectively hide its energy signature from conventional detection methods. It was humanity's greatest technological achievement, and now their greatest vulnerability. Sarah moved to the control console, entering her authorization code to access the Omega Protocol. The system responded with a series of security prompts, each requiring higher levels of authorization. "How long will this take?" Park asked, positioning himself at the door with the remaining defenders. 3 minutes to initialize the sequence," Sarah replied, fingers flying over the console. "Another 2 minutes for full quantum cascade failure." "We may not have 5 minutes," Park said grimly. Contacts approaching from multiple directions. As if to emphasize his point, weapons fire echoed from the corridor outside. The defenders they'd left behind were engaging the enemy. Sarah worked frantically at the console, bypassing safety protocols and overriding failsafes. The Hawking drive began to hum at a higher pitch as its containment systems were systematically disabled. "Commander," Park called urgently from the door. "They've broken through the outer defenses." Sarah completed the final authorization sequence. The console flashed red, displaying the countdown. 447, 446. "It's done," she said. "In less than 5 minutes, the drive will initiate a quantum cascade failure. Nothing within half a kilometer will survive." Park nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Then we need to get as many of our people off this ship as possible." Sarah activated her command comm. "All hands, this is Commander Hayes. Omega Protocol has been initiated. Abandon ship. I repeat, abandon ship. All personnel proceed to emergency evacuation pods immediately." Throughout the Thunderchild, the few remaining human crew members who could still move began making their way to escape pods, fighting and dying to give their comrades a chance to escape. "Get to an escape pod, Lieutenant," Sarah told Park. "That's an order." Park hesitated. "What about you, Commander?" Sarah looked at the Hawking drive, its quantum fields now visibly destabilizing as the containment systems failed. "Someone needs to make sure the Vex don't abort the sequence. Now go." After a moment's hesitation, Park gave a sharp salute, then led the remaining defenders toward the nearest evacuation point. Sarah sealed the door behind them, then destroyed the control panel with her rail pistol. No one would be entering the chamber now, not without cutting through nearly a meter of reinforced bulkhead. She checked the countdown. 321, 320. Sarah positioned herself with her back to the drive, facing the sealed door, weapon ready. She had no illusions about escaping. The moment she'd entered the final authorization code, she'd accepted her fate. The Thunderchild had been her command, her responsibility. She would go down with her ship, ensuring that its secrets died with her. The outer door began to glow as Vex cutting tools worked at the metal. They were persistent, she had to give them that. But they were too late. Even if they breached the chamber now, the cascade failure was irreversible. 25, 24. The door began to give way, sections of metal falling inward as the Vex cutters completed their work. Sarah raised her weapon, prepared to sell her life dearly. But what came through the breach wasn't what she expected. Instead of the insect-like Vex boarders, a lone figure in a burned and battered UES uniform stumbled through. It took Sarah a moment to recognize Lieutenant Chen, her bridge officer, his face streaked with blood and soot. "Commander," he gasped, seeing her. "Thank God." "Chen." Sarah lowered her weapon, momentarily confused. "What are you doing here? Where are the Vex?" "They're retreating," Chen said, his voice filled with disbelief. "All of them. Just suddenly disengaged and started heading back to their breaching points. Something's happening out there." Sarah's comm unit crackled to life. "Thunderchild, this is Admiral Torres. Do you copy?" "Torres. What's going on?" Sarah demanded. "The damnedest thing, Commander," Torres replied, his voice tinged with wonder. "The new Vex fleet. They're not reinforcements. They're fighting the original Vex vessels." Sarah stared at Chen in disbelief, then looked at the countdown timer. 142, 141. "We need to abort the cascade," she said, lunging for the console. "Can you stop it?" Chen asked, moving to her side. "Not completely, but I can redirect the energy flow." Her fingers flew across the interface, entering emergency override codes. "It'll still destroy the drive, but it might not take the whole ship with it." The console flashed a warning, but accepted her commands. The countdown continued, but the status indicators shifted from critical red to cautionary yellow. "What's happening out there?" Sarah asked, activating the emergency communication system. "It appears to be some kind of civil conflict," Torres explained. "The new arrivals are using different markings and configurations. They're actively targeting the vessels that attacked you." Sarah and Chen made their way to an auxiliary sensor station, bringing up a visual of the space battle outside. Sure enough, Two distinct groups of Vex ships were engaged in combat, their weapons tearing into each other with the same ferocity they had earlier directed at human vessels. "Commander," Patel's voice came through the comm. "I'm picking up a transmission from one of the new Vex vessels. It's being broadcast on our frequencies, using our encryption protocols." Before Sarah could respond, a new voice spoke through the comm system, distinctly inhuman, with strange harmonics and tonal shifts, yet clearly understandable. "Human Warship, this is Emissary Ket Vex of the Autonomous Collective. The vessels attacking you are members of the dominant hierarchy, a faction that seeks to consume all other sentient species. We have been tracking them across multiple systems. We are not your enemy." Sarah exchanged stunned looks with Chen. "Is this legitimate?" she asked. "Confirmed," Patel replied. "The new fleet is actively engaging the original attackers and appears to be winning. They've created a defensive perimeter around the Thunderchild." The implications were staggering. Not a monolithic enemy, but factions, politics, the possibility of diplomacy where they'd assumed only conflict was possible. "Emissary Ket Vex," Sarah responded carefully. "I am Commander Hayes of the UES Thunderchild. We appreciate your intervention, but our vessel has sustained critical damage. We've initiated a contained drive implosion that cannot be fully stopped." "Understood, Commander," the alien voice replied. "We will maintain distance but continue to protect your vessel from the hierarchy forces. We have much to discuss, if you are willing." Over the next several hours, as emergency teams worked to stabilize the Thunderchild's damaged systems and evacuate the critically wounded, the full story emerged. The Vex weren't one species but a coalition of several, split into competing ideological factions. The hierarchy had been conducting unauthorized expansion into human space, violating the collective's own protocols regarding first contact with new spacefaring species. As Sarah sat in her damaged ready room with Admiral Torres, who had come aboard once the situation stabilized, she contemplated how quickly everything had changed. "They're requesting formal diplomatic contact," Torres said. "Fleet Command is cautiously optimistic." Sarah nodded, looking at the casualty reports on her desk. 217 dead, hundreds more wounded. The Thunderchild will require months in space dock for repairs. "It could have been much worse," Torres reminded her. "Without your actions, we might have lost everything." Sarah thought about how close they had come to all-out war with a civilization that might have become an ally, how thin the line was between extinction and understanding. "The hierarchy ships that escaped have gone into hiding," Torres continued. "The collective is helping us track them down. They seem genuinely interested in peaceful relations." Sarah set down the reports and looked out her viewport at the strange, elegant vessels of their new potential allies, still maintaining a protective formation around the damaged Thunderchild. "First contact is always the hardest," she said quietly. "Let's make sure second contact goes better." Torres nodded, and together they prepared to usher humanity into a new and complex chapter of interstellar relations, one where the line between friend and foe wasn't as clear as they'd once believed, and where understanding an alien culture might prove as important as military might. The stars outside seemed different now. Not just a battlefield, but a community, albeit one with its own conflicts and dangers. And humanity had just taken its first real step into that larger community, bloody but unbowed, ready to face whatever came next.